Hey guys, hey, this is Jason Morris here this morning. We are having a little trouble getting Brian on this morning. He's having a little bit of technical difficulties. His Zoom isn't. He's having a little bit of technical difficulties and a little trouble logging in. But guys, I know that one of the things that I want to talk about with you guys today is fear. And is having the idea of overcoming fear when we have those problems, those issues in our life, overcoming fear when we're getting on the phone and things like that. And I want to give you guys a couple of strategies, and if Brian can get his technical difficulties worked out, we'll add him to the call and get him to tell us some things that he's been doing and things that he's been using here himself. But one of the things that I see a lot of agents do, especially new agents, is they get a little bit nervous when they go to get on the phone. They get that pit in their stomach. And I've been in the same place, especially when I first started calling, or even when I take like a couple of weeks off, I'll go to get on the phone. I'll go to get back started with things. And it's like, oh man, I don't want to do it today. Have you guys ever had that feeling? Where you just don't, today's just not a good day. Today's just not a good day for you to start back calling. Now, I'll tell you a couple of things that I do myself to get over that feeling. The number one thing is I review my goals, and I review my goals regularly. And the reason being is because situations just like that where I just can't, I'm just having a bad day. I just don't want to do it. Maybe I made my coffee a little too weak that morning. I didn't get a Red Bull, whatever it is, but I just don't feel like, getting up and going to work that day. So the big thing I do is I write down all my goals, and I've worked my goals backwards. And I know I've been teaching this in my group coaching. So what I do is I work my numbers backwards and I track. And we're going to talk about that here in a little couple hours when my spot's on at 12, but I track my numbers so that I can work back through and I can actually figure out what I need to do to get where I need to be. How many calls do I need to make? How many appointments do I need to go on? How many listings do I need to take to get the number of sales that I want to make? And the thing that we all want is we all want a predictable business, because for most of us, our business is kind of going like this. It's just kind of going up and down. One month you have 5 closings. The next month you have a 0, and it really sucks when you're doing that. But once you start tracking your numbers and you figure out where you need to be and what you want to be, and you review those numbers every day and you look at your goals, and I hate the term the big why, but we almost have to find that big why in our lives. And it's the big why is just, why are we getting on the phone? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing whatever it is? And one of the things that I teach my group coaching clients to do is to figure out what you don't want to do worse, right? If real estate doesn't work out for you, if you do not start making calls, if you don't start getting more listings, what are you going to have to start? What are you going to have to go back to doing? For me, gosh, when I started, I was a broke college kid. I worked at Sears, and Sears was a great job, at the time. However, man, I hated it. I had to be there at a certain time. I had to stay until a certain time. I had to do what they wanted to do. I had to wear a tie. I had all these things that I had to do. And when I got in the real estate business, I felt like I couldn't fail. The reason was I didn't want to go back to doing those things. And so what you have to do in your life is you have to identify what you don't want to have to do again and what that thing is. So if that thing is, it might be a spouse or significant other telling you like another "I told you so." It could be, whatever your job was that you absolutely hated it. You hated not having time off. You hated not having weekends off. You hated not being able to do the things that you wanted to do or provide the things for your family that you wanted to provide for them. Make a list of those things that you fear more than getting on the phone. And when you have that little pit in your stomach and that little feeling like, hey, I'm a little bit scared, you go back and look at those things and decide what's worse, me getting on the phone today or me going back to whatever I'd done first. Like guys, like this is a story that I have. My dad was a contractor, and I went all around the southeast with him, helping him build apartment complexes and hotels and stuff. And so I had a lot of exposure to the real estate business before I'd gotten into it. I didn't know much about it, but the thing is every day that I went to work with him when I was out of college, it was basically, man, if there was a ditch you had to dig, if there was a house that I had to get on, somebody had to get on top of, if there was something that had to be crawled under, I was that guy, right? And I went to college so that I would not have to do that, right? And I think that you have to figure out those things in your life that you fear more than getting on the phone and prospecting and calling. Okay. Now, another strategy I've used in my life is when I think about something like that I'm scared of, or I'm worried about, or whatever it is, I like to think about what's the worst case. Okay. So what's the worst case when you get on the phone and you make calls? Okay. Let's talk about this. Worst case is somebody hangs up on you, right? They hang up on you, and what happens when they hang up on you is you just dial the next number. Okay. That's one. And how many people in here, how many people have ever been hung up on? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or press the thumbs up button if you're watching from Facebook Live. Have you ever been hung up on? It really wasn't that bad. They just hung up and they just went away, and that was it, So the other thing is maybe they say something mean to you, and you hang up on them. I mean, that could happen too. So then the third worst thing is they want you to sit. For some agents, is they want you to come out to their house and talk to them about listing it, because some agents, they're not afraid of no's, they're afraid of yes. What do they do if the person actually says yes? They're worried about what happens then. But really, that's about it. Worst case is they hang up on you, or they say something mean to you and you hang up on them. More than likely that person is not going to recognize you in Walmart later on this afternoon. They can't eat you. If they do, they're going to have to kill you first, but they can't eat you. And they don't know where you're at or where you live at, more than likely, unless you told them over the phone. So that's really it. Worst things that can happen, they hang up on you or you hang up on them. So when I started realizing that and going down through that whole process myself, it really made it a lot easier. Now, I want to tell you guys one of the reasons why I believe you should be on the calls every day. So how many people listen to this just hate driving buyers around? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or type in the comments there if you're watching from Facebook. How many people hate driving buyers around? They don't like it. They don't want to sit there and talk about the color of the dining room. They don't want to talk about how they want to negotiate $10,000 off because they don't like the carpet in one of the bathrooms. They don't like one of the floorings in one of the bathrooms. How many people have ever had something like that happen? How many people have ever drove around that buyer for 2 days? It was qualified. They thought they were a perfect buyer. And then the person wants to offer $110,000 on a $150,000 house. Have you ever had that happen to you? After all the work you put in, all the research to find them the perfect list of homes from MLS, to set up all those appointments, and then they take and offer 40% less than asking price. Or my favorite is the people that say that, oh yeah, I'm an investor. You spend days combing through MLS, working through MLS, just working your ass off for these people, right? You find them a great deal. You find them a house for, like, let's just say $60,000 is worth 100. You take it to them. You send them all the comps. You send them all your hard work and all your energy and everything. And for them to send you back, yeah, we'll offer $25,000 for you. How many of you guys have had that happen with investors? Okay, and this is a question that I absolutely hate, right? That I'm going to tell you is, how many of you guys have had stuff going on with your family and friends that you had to cancel because a buyer popped up, a buyer you've been working with for weeks popped up and said, oh, Jason, I got to see this house over here. And you had to go out and you had to cancel that those plans with those friends or family. Have you ever had that happen? Comment on Facebook or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. If you've ever had that happen, you've had to cancel plans because a buyer just showed up and thought you should quit doing whatever you should do and you should go show them property. How many of you guys have ever had that happen? I tell you what, that is my pet peeve. That is the thing that drives me crazy in life. If you got a doctor's appointment, an attorney appointment, an accounting appointment, a dentist appointment, whatever it is, you set an appointment ahead of time, right? We're the only profession that people think they can just call you at 9 o'clock, and at 9:15, you're supposed to go unlock doors for them. And it sucks. How many of you guys would like to change that in your business? If you'd like to change that, if you'd like to get rid of all those buyers that pop up on you and make you cancel plans, make you cancel plans with your friends, make you cancel plans with your family. How many of you guys would like to get rid of those people? I will tell you, me and Laura, we were on a cruise a couple of years ago, and I've told this story several times. So if you already heard it, I'm going to tell it to you one more time. So we were on a cruise. We were out there in the Caribbean, and we were hanging out on a ship. And while we were on the boat, I sold 3 properties. I made $18,000 while we were on the boat. And I want to tell you guys how I done that. The number one thing I did was I got over my fear of making calls. And I changed my business from being a buyer-heavy business to a seller-heavy business. And so the thing that happens when you do that is if you use a showing service and you set up all your calls with that showing service, right? Or you set up all your listings with that showing service, then what ends up happening is people call the showing service to show your houses. Other agents start showing your houses, right? You can have 50 buyers that are all qualified today, and there's no way that you can ever show them property this week. You can have 50 sellers. You can have 50 seller listings on MLS right now, right? And they can all be shown this weekend while you are listening to Battle Plan 2018. I'll tell you this morning, during Colton Lindsay's call, I set up 3 showing appointments. They were all done with showing time. All I had to do was click to approve them while I was on the call with them. How many of you guys would like to be able to do stuff like that while you're hanging out with your family, while you're watching TV, or while you're doing, maybe you're out of town? How many of you guys would like to do stuff like that? So the way that you can do that is to change your business. And the way that you can change your business and cost effectively get more listings is to start prospecting. If you knew that you could make a change in your life like that and you wouldn't have to deal with all the buyers that you hate and all the stuff that they do, would you overcome that fear of picking up the phone? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or type in the comments if you're on Facebook Live. Would you get on the phone more if you knew that it meant that you'd never have to put another buyer in your car? You'd never have to deal with another person that wasn't unqualified, or you'd never have to drive somebody around that was going to make a crazy lowball offer. I tell you guys, once you change your business and you start picking up the phone and actually prospecting, it's not only going to change, it's going to change several things. When you get really, really good on the phone, not only is it going to change your business, it's going to change your life, and it's going to change your bank account, right? Colton left out one detail, and I don't know if he's listening to this, but Colton left out one detail of what he talked about on how he went from being a negative to $2 million. The way that he done that, now he does have multiple sources of income, like he said, but the big way he started that, the way he started climbing out of debt, is because he picked up the phone and started doing it. So guys, once you get your big why, once you get the things that you want to do, the goals that you want to reach, and the things that you want out of your life, and you make a list out of those things. If you want to take vacation for a season rather than a week, if you want to fly first class, or you want to pay the extra $60 for the big seats on Spirit rather than little tiny seats in the back, if you want to do that, the thing that you can do is get really good on the phone. Now, I want to share with you guys a couple of other things that's going to help you overcome fear too. One of the things that I've learned, and this was something I learned from Tony Robbins, is if there's something out there that we fear, another way we can overcome it is we get really familiar and we really educate ourselves on the process of what it is that is causing the fear, right? And we get really good at what to do when this happens, right? Now, I believe that we can go out there and we can fight lions if we practice enough and we figure out a strategy to be able to do it. Okay. And I believe that any of you guys that are listening to this can get really, really good on the phone. And the way that you got to get really good on the phone is you have to practice and you have to use scripts. So I'm going to tell you guys here in the next few minutes how to make a script magical. Because you can make just about any script that you want to, any script that you're using, you can make it magical. Who wants a magical script? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom or comment if you're on Facebook. Would you guys like me to give you the magic that makes a script magical? How to figure out what questions are going to help you set an appointment with a seller. Guys, the thing that makes a script magical is practicing that script. I know that answer probably wasn't as exciting as what you guys were looking for, but here's the thing that happens. When you take that same list of questions and you ask 100 sellers, you ask 1,000 sellers, right? You ask the exact same questions. It's not going to be long until you know all the answers to those questions, right? And then it's not going to be long after that until you know all the objections you're going to get and you're going to know how to overcome those objections. And that's why role playing is important. Because here's the thing too, if we take and we got really good, think about this, guys. How would it change your business if you got really good at overcoming the top 3 objections? How many of you guys that have been making calls have ever heard on the phone the objection, I don't want to work with a realtor? Have you ever heard that one? What if you got really good at overcoming that one objection, right? How about what would happen if you got really good at overcoming that objection, but you also got really good at overcoming the objection, I don't want to pay a commission? You know, have you ever heard that one before? Man, that's a tough one there. And what my favorite, this is my favorite question here, guys, our favorite objection. I love getting this. I know that I'm probably going to list their house when I get this objection. The objection, we'll pay you 3% if you bring a buyer. When I hear that objection, guys, I don't get worried. I get excited. And the reason I get excited is because I know I've changed my thinking around. I know 2 things, actually. Number 1, they're willing to work with me. That's number 1. Number 2, they're willing to pay a commission. Now, the only thing we're doing now is we're negotiating how much commission they're going to pay me, right? And the way that you get really good at overcoming those objections is by practicing them. Now, the other thing that happens when you start practicing these objections and you start practicing these scripts and you know exactly what to say, all that fear that you've had of getting over on the phone, all that fear is going to start to go away because you know exactly what to do. You know, it's just like I mentioned earlier, you know, we could fight lions, we can tame lions, you know, we can go out and fight bear. You know, when you go to things like the zoo, when you go to things like the circus and you see these big animals and you see these trainers in there and they're working with them and they're making them do all these tricks and stuff. The reason why these guys have no fear is because they practice this same thing over and over again. And they've been in that same situation with that type of animal over and over again. You know, one of the things that I think is amazing is when we start looking at other people's lives and other professions. And a while back, I was preparing for a coaching call for my group coaching people. And it was on just this thing. It was on fear. So I was thinking, like, how could I relate this to them? And what could I talk about that, you know, was like a good story? And one of the guys that came to mind was Evel Knievel. Raise your hand if you guys ever heard of him, Evel Knievel. Now, Evel Knievel, he was famous for you guys that probably a little younger than I am. For you guys that don't know who Evel Knievel was, he's a famous daredevil. He done a lot of things. He jumped, you know, tanks of sharks. He jumped like boats. He jumped cars. He jumped some fire. I think he jumped the Grand Canyon or something like that all on a motorcycle. Now, I'll tell you what, the thought of getting on a motorcycle and jumping over, you know, a line of buses or jumping over a big fire pit or something like that, or through some fire rings, I don't know about you guys, but that seems scary as hell to me, right? But here's the thing. I bet Evel Knievel will be scared to pick up the phone and call people too. Now, one of the things I started looking at was, how did this guy, if we can figure out how Evel Knievel got rid of the fear of doing these amazing jumps and doing all this daredevil stuff, then it should be pretty easy for us to get over the fear of getting on the phone, right? I mean, that seems logical to me. If we can jump through rings of fire, we should be able, if we can figure out how to overcome that fear, we should be able to overcome the fear of getting on the phone. So what I started doing was I started thinking about it, and I started reading about him and reading websites and Wikipedia pages and all this stuff. And one thing I started noticing was, one of the things Evel Knievel did was, he jumped over all these things, right? And he made all these death-defying feats and stunts. The thing I noticed when I started really looking at it was, all of these jumps were the same distance. Whether he was jumping cars, whether he was jumping through rings of fire, whether he was jumping, a tank full of sharks, whatever it was really about the same distance as the last jump he done. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I started looking up more information about him. And what I realized was that Evel Knievel basically had this jump, this distance, with this pitch of ramps and everything, basically set up in his own backyard. So what Evel Knievel was doing was, basically every day, this guy was getting out there and going doing a couple of jumps, right? And the thing is, we get a lot of fear in the real estate industry, where we're scared to call a bigger property type, right? We've been calling in the $150,000 range, and we want to move up to the $550,000 range, but we're going, oh man, well, those people are going to want so much more, and those people are going to want so much more for me, and they're, it's scary. I'm calling 3 times, 300% increase in your average price, right? But here's the thing: it's the same jump, it's the same principles, it's the same process, it's the same script. Typically, most of the time, the reason people want to sell their house is they have a problem. Now, this is the average seller. They have a problem, and they believe that selling that house is going to fix that problem, which, therefore, I like to think of myself as a problem. I'm an expert problem solver. Okay. So all we're doing is we're just fixing problems, right? It doesn't matter what the house is, the house type, condo, land, house, 150,000, 550,000, doesn't really matter, because it's the same set of questions you're going to ask on the phone. You're going to get the same objections. You might get an objection that's a little bit more expensive, instead of them being behind, $2,500 in payments, maybe they're behind, $25,000 in payments, but instead of them moving, across town for a job, they're moving, to a different state for a job. But really, once you start looking at it, you get the same thing. You get the same objections. It doesn't matter. I'd be willing to bet right now with the people, there's about 60, 70 people on this Facebook Live right now, and I'd be willing to bet, doesn't matter what market you are in the country, that you've had those same 3 objections. I don't want to work with a real estate agent. I don't want to pay a commission, and I'll pay you 3% if you bring a buyer. So the thing is, it doesn't matter what price range you're working in. It's going to be the same. It doesn't matter what area of town you're working in. It's going to be the same. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you're working in or what street in that neighborhood you're working on. You're going to get those same objections every single time, and you're going to get them over and over again. Guys, one of the things I used to get worried about when I would call is that somebody would probably recognize, that angry guy would recognize me later, But the thing was, or, maybe when I got to the house, they wouldn't like me, They wouldn't like me. Maybe I didn't wear a suit and tie, maybe my shoes weren't as fancy as the last guy. Maybe I didn't drive as nice of a vehicle. And one of the things that I've learned over 14 years of selling real estate is the thing that sellers want, and it doesn't matter what price range or what street or what neighborhood they're on, the things that typically the seller works with the agent that does the best at one of 2 things. Number one, the agent that they can trust the most, because I believe that we're in an industry now. Several years ago, we were the gatekeepers of information. We're no longer the gatekeepers of information. We're the gatekeepers of trust. People work with us because they trust us, right? The seller is going to work with the agent that he trusts the most and the agent that they think has the best plan for them, right? I mean, you guys think about it. If you guys had to have major surgery, what doctor would you work with? Would you care about what car he drove? Honestly, would you care about the brand or the franchise he's with? Would you care about the sign out front of the office? You would want to work with the doctor that you trust the most, that you feel like has the best plan, right? And I see this all the time with agents. Agents show up and they don't have a plan. This is one of the things I talk about in my group coaching over and over again, is that we have to have a plan. A lot of agents just show up, and I'm guilty of doing this. When I first started selling real estate, I was really good at telling people whatever they wanted to hear that let me get a foot in their door. And now what would happen, sometimes when I'd get my foot in the door, I'd try to stay until I wore them down and got them to sign some paperwork, I don't know how many of you guys have done that. How many of you guys are going on listing appointments that take an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, You leave the listing appointment, you are just exhausted. Have you guys ever done that? I remember going on those where I'd do 2 or 3 in a day. And man, I'd feel like I couldn't even drive home. I'd be so tired. And the thing is, I didn't really have a plan. I would just sit there and kind of react to whatever they were doing, right? And I would try to mirror whatever they wanted. And a lot of it was like, oh, yeah, Mr. Seller, we do that too. We do that too. Now, one of the times that I realized my business really changed is when I started showing up with a plan. I quit fumbling around when I got in the door. Right? I developed myself a plan, and that plan is my pre-listing package. And if you guys want a free copy, just go to jasonmorrisprelistingpackage.com. You can download my template there for free and start filling it out. Now, it's only 12 pages. It's got some images in there. Those are just for placeholders and ideas for you guys. You don't have to use the exact same ones, but to give you an idea of what you need to do to get started to build your own plan. Now, here's the thing. When you have a plan, fear goes away on listing appointments as well. Because you know exactly what to do, what to say. And here's the thing that I learned is I would have a little bit of a leg up on the competition if I started my plan and started telling them about it before I ever got to their front door. And so what I done was I come up with a listing system. In my listing system, I start selling them before I get to the front door. The first thing I do when I set an appointment is I send them over the pre-listing package. Then I text them to make sure that they got the pre-listing package. Then the first thing I do when I walk through their door is I say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Sellers, great to meet you guys. My name's Jason Morris. Let me ask you, you got my pre-listing package too. I just want you to know about me, my company, and what we do to sell houses. And how many of you guys have ever got the objection, oh, we want to interview more agents? Or we're meeting multiple agents? Raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or comment in the comments below if you're on Facebook. How many of you guys hate that too? How many of you guys, when they say we want to interview other agents, you get that little pit in your stomach? You're going, oh man, I'm going for nothing, right? I will tell you what, I am not the agent that does that. I am the agent that tells them, hey guys, that sounds great. I think you should interview more agents. And what I think you should do is I want to send you over my package that tells about me, my team, and what we do to sell real estate. And what I want you to do is I want you to ask them for their package too. That way you can lay them side by side and you can compare apples to apples and make sure that you're getting the agent with the best plan to sell your house. 9.9 out of 10 times they never get anything from the other agent. And when I show up in their front door, I always ask the same thing. I go, hey, Mr. Seller, you got my pre-listing package, right? They go, oh, yeah, we got it. I was, oh, great. You looked through it. Do you have any questions? That's fantastic. Now, how about the other agent? You told me you're going to meet another agent too. I just want to make sure they sent you theirs too. That way you can compare us and compare the services we offer and the marketing plan that we have, because I know mine works. And 9.9 out of 10 times they tell me, oh, well, they don't have anything. And my first reaction is, oh my gosh, I hope they're not going to just stick a sign in the front yard and hope for the best. Because, what are you going to do if you don't have a written plan, that must be what you can do. Stick a sign out front, right? And just hope that something happens. Hope somebody drives by and tells you something. Now, once I get to the door, I have four presentations that are part of my listing appointment. I have the listing presentation, what I do on the appointment. I have my pricing presentation, which I use an active pricing strategy to price properties. When I explain it to sellers, that it's a plan that's easy and they can buy into it, right? Then I always present a net sheet to them because I want them to trust me as much as possible, and I want everything to be out in the open. I am 110% transparent with them. If I think there's a problem, I point it out. And I don't point out problems, though. I point out problems and suggest solutions. I prefer to suggest the solution before I mention the problem. For example, hey, Mr. Seller, have you guys thought about cleaning the carpet? Or maybe we can offer a credit towards it. Don't just talk about problems, talk about solutions, because that's what you're there for. You're not there to talk about all the problems with their house. You're there to talk about solutions. You're there to talk about fixing their problem, not create more for them. And that's what a lot of agents do. And that's why a lot of agents don't get listings, is because they're showing up at the appointment and they're not fixing problems. They're just creating more problems for the seller, And, guys, I'd rather list their house a little bit cheaper and get it on the market than have them spend a ton of money on paint, carpet, and staging to get to list their house maybe 3 months down the road. And usually it's money that seller doesn't have. I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with that. Most of my sellers I work with, I don't know if you're like this in your market. Most of my sellers, they know what problems they have with their house. And if they had the money to fix them, they'd probably already fixed them. I mean, typically, lots of times, they're the person that's pointing them out before I am. So I am 110% transparent with them about what I think might be a problem or issue. However, I'll offer solutions to every problem that I point out. Okay, the last part of my presentation is the paperwork. And guys, I can't really help you with the paperwork. And I tell my coaching clients this too. I can't really help them with their paperwork because I'm only licensed in the state of South Carolina. I don't know what the listing agreement says on page 2, paragraph 3 of the Idaho listing agreement, However, one thing I can tell you for sure is that most of the time brokers have contract classes, and what they do is they get all the agents in the contract class. They go down through that legal document. It is a legal document. They go down through it word for word. How many of you guys have ever seen this, or you ever done it? Remember this as being a new agent, the broker in charge, going down through word for word. Then they tell you that one story that happened one time in the history of South Carolina real estate. And that's why we have paragraph number 7. And what happens with a lot of these agents is they take and they learn the listing agreement that way. And then they go out to the seller's house and they explain it to the seller that same way. And the problem with that is this is a legal document. Number one, it's kind of offensive when you read 11 pages word for word to somebody else. That's number one. And number two is, even if you do read it word for word to them, there's a lot of big words in there. And there's a lot of things that are easy to get misunderstood. The last presentation that you guys need to do, and I'll tell you what, if you guys, especially new agents, this is the one thing I think you should take away from this for sure, without a doubt, is there's probably only 4 or 5 contracts you really use in your state. Like the state of South Carolina, I think there's only 5 or 6 contracts we use like 90% of the time, right? And the thing that you need to do is you need to get really, really good at presenting those 4 or 5 contracts so that you can easily, effectively relay them to your sellers or your buyers or whoever you're working with so that they feel comfortable signing them with you. Typically, most of the time, if you guys are going on listing appointments and people love what you say, they like what you said, they liked you built a lot of rapport, you showed them how you wanted to price it, they thought it was fantastic, and you went through this whole process with them. And everybody liked everybody. And then all of a sudden at the end, you went down through the paperwork. And the husband looked at the wife and they said, I think we need to think about this. The thing that probably happened during your listing appointment, now I wasn't there, but the thing that probably happened is the way that you presented the paperwork to them. They did not feel comfortable signing it with you right then. And that happens a lot. I've seen it so many times. But guys, the point of this call here is that is that if you guys go through and you have a system and you create a process and you practice that, right? You practice your listing appointments, you practice your scripts, you practice overcoming those objections until you get really, really good at it. It's going to get rid of that fear. So guys, I really appreciate you guys being on today. I'm sorry Brian couldn't make it. I got a couple of minutes. If you guys have a couple of questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything for you. I think we got about 10 minutes before John Machello comes on. John is always exciting. John is extremely experienced. He created a software called More GCI, and also John was a trainer at one of the top Keller Williams offices in the country. And he has a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. Do you guys have any questions here? Anything I can help you? Any specific problems you're having? I tell you what, Suzanne, for you guys listening on Zoom, Suzanne Eckersley had a great suggestion. She's up in Canada, but what she did was she took samples of her listing agreement and samples of purchase and sale with an attorney, and had an attorney help her outline some things that people needed and stuff in there, and things that people should go through. But guys, I really appreciate you guys being on with me today, and we'll see you in a few minutes with John Machello.